Are we live? I think we're live. I'm going to go with live. I'm looking over here. It says video starting. You're now live. Oh, it just said you're now live, and then it just also said do something else. Good morning. How are you? I'll be right back. I have to, flip the switch over here to make everything work so that I can talk to you and see what you're saying and see that you're here, which is always exciting. All right, here we go. Love for a couple of reasons. And the big one is that today I want to talk about, I guess the word I'm looking for is subliminal influencing. Although I don't know how sublime a yellow glove is. Nevertheless, here we are. Oh, Garen, hello. Good morning. How are you? Good to see you. So, the conversation today, I've been talking to people, obviously. It's one of my skills. I've been talking to people about how they're doing, how you're doing, how's it going, how are you feeling, and sometimes they've said, what is the matter with your hair? Anyway, and every time I have one of these conversations, I realize more and more clearly that it is frustrating when we know a thing isn't working and we know we're smart enough to figure out why, and yet we can't. That's kind of the cherry icing cake experience. I should be able to do this. I clearly should be able to figure this out. I don't need the instructions. This should be something that is just natural to me. And I'm hearing it so often that I'm realizing that in my conversations with people, I've made an assumption that we're all on the same page, that if I know it, you know it, and therefore I don't need to discuss it. And it's really important when I have these little aha moments because, whoops, because it reminds me how crazy it is that we speak the same language, but we don't hear the same meanings. We don't see the same connections. Why not? Well, because we're all wired differently. We're all really wired differently, and I don't mean crazy or not crazy, or eccentric or not eccentric. I mean fundamentally, right from the motherboard, we're wired differently. And I thought, what a great thing to talk about right now, because we're kind of easing into the second half of the summer, and we're already looking at the fall. I know that when I'm looking at things that are on sale, all of a sudden it's autumn clothes. Fortunately, they still haven't started to advertise Halloween, so but it is unsettling. So I wanted to spend this morning talking about things that we do. Happiness at work happens at work a lot. However, since I have experience, I just stand back and chuckle. Yes. So, of course you do, Grim. Is going to make huge sense in about 3, 2, 1. So, you know how they talk about the elephant in the room? And the elephant in the room expression means it's this huge thing that's in the way that everybody knows is there and everybody ignores because they don't want to discuss it. It's inconvenient. It's awkward. Okay. That's not what this is. What is going on is the iceberg in the room. And I'm going to explain what that means. Everyone, I think, knows, has discovered, read about, saw the fact that an iceberg, the part that we see, is roughly 10%. That 90% of the iceberg is below the waterline where we can't see it. It is just trundling along there, oblivious to what's going on up top. It's paying no attention to anything because it's on its own agenda. It has its own mission. And the part up top is not paying attention to what's going on below. It's looking and saying, oh, look, I can see my house from here. And the two aren't really connected in any way except physically. That's our brain. That is how we operate. Going back to that motherboard thing, going back to the computer analogy, when we're working away on our phones or on the keyboard on our computer, we're not paying attention to all the stuff that's already programmed in there until something goes zert and we can't operate it, and then we get upset. And we have to call somebody who knows what they're doing. That would be me. I have to call somebody who knows what they're doing. And they say, oh yeah, I'll just have to do this. Mind you, I'm going to wipe everything you did for the last 6 months. What? Wait, no, you can't. And therein lies the issue and the solution. And it's so exciting and it's so wonderful. I can't wait to tell you. But first, I'm going to tell you a story that illustrates this. I'm doing this backwards this morning. Oh well. So my parents and I had a couple of traditions. And one of them, after I left home, was that we would watch 60 Minutes on Sunday night. Wherever they were and wherever I was, we would watch 60 Minutes. And then I would call them. And they were really big on 60 Minutes, and they got me hooked on it. My dad, in order to get qualified to enter staff college and become an officer, because my dad hadn't finished high school, he attended training to elevate his status. In order to get into that training, staff college, he studied Time magazine. He and my mother subscribed to Time magazine. Always had. And it's not whether it was liberal or conservative or whatever. It's that it was the only magazine that intensely covered current events and referenced history. And they every single one that came out, they read it, they discussed it, and it gave them a big picture perspective on everything. So when my dad was told that all he had to do was qualify to get into staff college, they hauled out all their old Time magazines, and my dad studied them, and then my mom quizzed him, so that he really had all the pertinent stuff down pat. He went in, he took the exam, he aced the course, got huge high marks, and the rest is history. He attended staff college. He caused everyone the utmost damned astonishment, and he walked out as an officer in the armed forces. Very exciting. So 60 Minutes was kind of the extension of that, and they wanted me to understand things that were going on that were large, written large. They were current, they reflected history, and they predicted in a lot of way the things that were to come. So I would call them, and we would talk about, what did you think of this, and what did you think of that? We always enjoyed the bit at the end that was sort of a funny, ironic postscript to the show. And so one day, I was watching 60 Minutes one Sunday. When the show ended, I automatically reached for the phone, and I dialed the number. And then I froze. As I heard it ring, I froze. Years after my mother had died, and even more years after my father had died. And yet, part of my brain had deleted the fact that this is now and they were then. Part of my brain automatically picked up that phone and dialed a number. I have that moment, I had no idea what number I had dialed. I had no clue. And it was 100 years ago, so of course it didn't have, redial and all that. I had no idea. I had no idea what I'd done. And it upset me. It confused me. It really unnerved me that something had short-circuited in my brain that sent me there. I had no idea what had just happened. So you know what had just happened? The memory hardwired into my subconscious brain kicked in. For some reason, that Sunday, for some reason, maybe it was the last item. No idea. The whole show is a blank. All I remember was sitting there thinking, how did I do that? How did I jump like that? What connected what that made me automatically react? And it was my subconscious. It was the part of me, the part of my brain, the 90% that's below the surface of the waterline of my life. And I think that is such a brilliant illustration of the way our brains work that when I wanted to talk about it today, I thought, I don't have a better story than that. That is imprinting. That is a habit, a routine, a tradition, an understanding, a connection that is so ingrained that it still lives. It still is. It's still live. If I could find it, I could do it again. I have no idea where it's stored, but I know it's there. And the reason I know it's there is that I can remember it and I can tell you the story now. Isn't that incredible? Now, I am sure that as I'm telling you this, you are saying, oh my God, gosh, that reminds me of this. It reminds me of that. I always joke, when I'm talking about being a military brat. And I say, when I used to do stand-up comedy, I would say, there are two ways you can spot a military brat. One is they can't tell the difference between forever and 4:30. And the other is they have no idea where their house is. And the reason for that, and by the way, any time I have ever done that in front of any kind of an audience, the people who laugh are the brats. The people who go, what the hell, are the civilians. And you can see, it's so funny. They do their reaction and then they look at each other because they have self-sorted. And so the reason I want to talk about this is both fun and funny and curious making. And at the same time, it's really important because it's very forgiving on the subject of what we're doing to ourselves right now and how we're feeling right now and how confused and frustrated and lost sometimes we're feeling right now. So here we go. I'm going to dive in. The fact is that this part of our brain, the 90%, so I'm pausing and I'm looking at me on the screen. So here, right? All of this is the stuff that's doing the work. This is decorative. So here's what's going on all the time, okay? The brain develops in stages. The day we decided to walk out of the ocean, and develop feet, walk out of the ocean, and walk into a cave and say, when's lunch? That brain that made that decision with us was a very primitive brain. It knew how to keep our hearts beating. It knew how to keep our breathing and our blinking and all that kind of stuff. And so those simple repetitive exercises are just basically making sure that all the machines are running. The biggest thing that very primitive brain does is it keeps us alive. It keeps us safe. It keeps us aware at all times that it's a jungle out there. Because when that brain developed, it was a jungle out there. There were no safe places. Nobody was standing around saying, ollie, ollie, and free. Time out. Nobody was saying time out. If you're a tiger and you're a bunny rabbit, the bunny rabbit's in trouble all the time. And that brain, that brain that's just under there, has never really changed. It still does that. That 90% is purely driven to survive, to keep us alive. And the way it does that is that it triggers emotion. It triggers fear. It triggers rage. It triggers freeze. It triggers all of the chemicals, the adrenaline, the hormones, the whatnot we need to respond in the instant when there's a threat. Once that brain figures out a routine that works, it keeps it. It locks it. Why? Because if it ain't broke, why fix it? Why update it? Why change it? It's working. I think that brain is probably what invented the status quo. The reason the status quo works is because that brain wants everything the same. That brain is very primitive. It is so primitive. It developed before we could speak. It developed before we understood cause and effect. It developed before we had abstract thought. It developed before we were capable of logic. All it does is fuel, funnel, and trigger automatic, reflex, knee-jerk responses. That's what it does. If the heart isn't going well, it triggers something. If we're late, it thinks we're going to die, it triggers something. Every single reaction we have that brain manages is pure survival emotion. There's nothing else. You know what's really interesting? You know when this comes up a lot is when something happens to us that we feel an upsurge of emotion that we didn't see coming, that we didn't expect. And all of a sudden we're either laughing, we're screaming, or we're crying, or we're dodging. And somebody over there who hasn't been impacted the way we have says, "What's wrong with you?" And we don't have the words to explain. You've been through that. You've experienced that. You've suddenly, you can't explain. You just, and we shake our heads. We don't know. The reason we don't know, the reason we can't explain it, the reason we can't use words is that we're full on being controlled by our subconscious, emotional, primitive brain in that moment, and that brain existed before words. We can't explain. We just know how to react, to respond, to resist. That's all we know in that moment when we are full on shocked into one of the flight, fight, fear responses. When I automatically picked up the phone that night to call my parents, this part of my brain knew perfectly well they were no longer alive. This part of my brain knew perfectly well that I hadn't picked up the phone to call them and talk about 60 Minutes in almost 10 years. If I'd stopped to ask myself, what are you doing? I would have laughed and put the phone down. But our subconscious brain works in a split second. It's lightning fast. Why? Because that's what survival requires. It's interesting, isn't it? It's interesting. That is 90% of us. And you know that thing I talk about, when we're driving down the highway and it's a long drive and it's a fairly straight road, if you think back on that drive, there's whole stretches of the highway you don't remember. There's whole stretches of the drive. The last sign you remember is 10 miles back, right? We've all done that. So the question is, well, if we can't remember it, who was driving? And the answer is the subconscious brain. Because the subconscious brain is good at simple, repetitive stuff. It can do this. It can do gas, brake. It's not so good at clutch, shift, manual. It's certainly not good in traffic because every response is brand new and immediate. But we certainly shift into it. We certainly suddenly find ourselves in it when somebody cuts us off. When somebody cuts us off, we can't hear anything that people are saying to us. We go instantly into road rage, and we are screaming and yelling. The fact that we're inside a car with the windows closed doesn't register. The fact that that guy can't hear us doesn't register. The fact that we're knuckles white gripping the steering wheel, screaming, doesn't register. What's happened? Fight or flight. Fight or flight. 90% of our brain function is doing that all the time. So, the reason I'm going on and on and on about that is that's where the imprinting is. Imprinting is how a brand, how a message, how an idea is embedded so deeply that we don't even know it's there. The difference between a brand and an imprint, a brand is a story. An imprint is a story we never forget because it becomes part of us. It's woven into the motherboard. It's part of who we are. So, why is this important? Why do I want to share this with you right now? Because fixing what isn't working for us is so frustrating and leaves us feeling so helpless and dumb and confused and incompetent. And it gets in the way of us enjoying who we are, of saying, I'm walking here. Because it undermines our confidence. It makes us feel useless. And we need to understand that we're not. Speaking of not useless, Charles is back. Yay! Good morning, Charles. Charles had to take his wife to the hospital for her tests. Didn't think he was going to make the show. Here he is. Awesome. So here's the thing about an imprint. If from the time we're born we believe something, we don't believe it here because when we're born, we don't have conversation. We don't have, oh, I see, well, that would be why this happens. we're babies. We're going, food, blah. We have none of the sophisticated brain functions formed yet. We're starting from scratch. When we're starting from scratch, when we are infants, the lessons we learn, the lessons that are embedded, are not lessons we are able to weigh as true, false, skewed a little, relevant, irrelevant, or just plain wrong. Just plain wrong. Accidentally, randomly wrong. We have no way to evaluate anything. Not because we're dumb, not because we're small. It's because those brains, the front brains, the conscious brains, they haven't shown up yet. They're the new kids on the block. So what I'm leading us to is an exercise in cutting us some slack, essential slack. In order to change what we're doing, we need to develop a different habit than the one we're used to. The subconscious brain doesn't like change because, rewind this tape, change is crazy when what we've been doing has kept us alive. Why do you want to change it? It's working. So the subconscious does everything it can to get in the way. It does crazy things. It makes us tired. It triggers whatever the hormones are that make us sleepy or distracted, or it'll get us busy. It'll get us upset about something so that we can't focus. It does that on purpose because whatever it is you're doing is alarming it, because it smells like change and we're not going to go there. This gets in the way of us doing something better for ourselves. This gets in the way of us recognizing that the thing we've always believed to be true might not be true. We are right now, as I'm talking to you, as I'm building this incredible concept called pivotry. And pivotry is the art of pivoting. Poet, poetry, dentist, dentistry, pivot, pivotry. How we pivot, why we pivot, what it's for, what it gives us the power to do is change what isn't working, is give us the tools to grow, to thrive, instead of merely survive. That's what a pivot can do. How we allow ourselves to do that is by getting in touch with that subconscious brain that isn't listening. La 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 la. How we do that is by quietly, carefully, consistently creating a new habit, a new pattern, a simple habit, a simple pattern. And we do it repeatedly every day, every day, every day, so that the subconscious brain says, well, that looks okay. And then it accepts it. And the longer we do the new thing, the stronger the connection gets. And the longer we do the new thing instead of the old thing, the weaker the connection becomes on the old thing. So if we decide, for instance, that it makes no sense to just randomly eat a bag of potato chips every time we watch television, and we're going to eat something instead that's healthier, or let's say just less empty and pointless, delicious but pointless, then all we have to do in order to fix that as our new habit is find something else to eat that delivers the same satisfying crunch, that delivers the same saltiness. Okay, what can we eat? Can we eat a healthy taco? Can we eat a tortilla chip? Can we put something on it? Sure. Can we eat celery and put some cheese on it? Sure. God, no, don't do that. All we want to do is quietly, easily, simply replace the bad habit with the new habit. And do it, and do it, and do it. And eventually, we don't automatically reach for the chips. We automatically go to the fridge and reach for the other thing. Reach for the celery. We go to the different cupboard. And by the way, you need a different cupboard for the taco chips that don't have junk on them. You need a different place to go because you need to rewire what you're doing. So when we do that, the subconscious accepts it because it's not a shock to the system. How we make that happen is a little complicated because we have to stay focused on the idea and we can't let the subconscious distract us. So to stay focused on the idea, we need to feel it. We need to feel what we're doing. We don't need to know what we're doing. The statistics aren't relevant. We need to feel, we need to taste, we need to smell, we need to touch, we need to have those feel experiences with the new thing, because that is what the subconscious remembers. That is all the subconscious knows. It sounds ridiculously easy. It isn't ridiculously easy. However, it's simple. So when I talk about success, and I do talk about success in the Pivotry book, and I talk about the fact that it is within our grasp, this is the thing that I'm talking about. I posted an image the other day, and I'm going to post it again when I put up this video with its little banner on it. And it's a picture of a yellow duck, a little duckling. And the reason I chose it is that I'm referencing a story that's pretty cool. PBS, years and years ago, did a documentary on a scientist who, way back in 1935, discovered something interesting. He discovered that little ducklings would follow him when he was walking around the yard. He had little ducklings, and the mother duckling had died. So they had nobody to follow. They started to follow him. He was wearing yellow rubber boots. He had no idea if it was the fact that the boots were yellow and so were they. All he knew is that they were following him. He realized that he was on the brink of a discovery, and this is the scientist. This is the man who won the prize, the Nobel Prize, for the discovery of imprinting. What he learned, what he realized, was that animals automatically follow the first moving thing they see at birth. They bond to it. Infants bond to the first caregiver. Why? Because it's going to save their lives. The subconscious says safety. The subconscious says alpha, safety, tribe, bond. And it's from birth. That's why being logical doesn't work. So this interesting thing about this duck experience was that this was a very ethical scientist. He was worried that the ducks, he could put food out, he could take it down to the water, and he could show them how to get the food, but he knew he couldn't teach them how to fly. And if he couldn't teach them how to fly, they wouldn't be able to blend in with the other ducks. They wouldn't be able to live the lives they're supposed to live. So he did this incredible thing. He got an ultralight. He got in an ultralight. And eventually, with practice, the ducks, as they grew old enough, flew behind him. He taught the ducks how to fly. The PBS special is something like The Man Who Flew with Ducks or something like that. And it's really quite, it's an awe moment because you think, wow, awe, it's that. So here's the thing. He was able to connect at a purely primitive survival level with those ducks. This is a rational, intelligent, curious, brilliant scientist who was able to connect with those little creatures. You realize that if he can do it, we can do it with us, right? We can find the way to give our very suspicious, very primitive, subconscious brain permission to accept something new. We won't call it change. We can do it by making the new thing seem like the old thing. We can do it. We do it all the time without realizing it. We discover a new restaurant. We go, not sure I'm going to like it. After we decide we love it, we go again. In a while, if it's always great food and it's always a great experience, the subconscious brain has considered that place safe. And quite often will just automatically direct us there when we're driving, when we're not paying attention. I think that this is the most incredible information, even though it's not necessarily funny or quirky or strange. I think it's so important to do this with you now, while we're still kind of in the middle of summer. We haven't yet started to seriously focus on fall. So we have this little window when we can think about something we want to do. Because when fall comes, we start saying, well, I got to get back in shape, and I got to do this, and I got to do that. And the subconscious brain is going, no, we're not doing that. Sure, sign up for the lessons. We're not doing that. If, however, right now, we start telling ourselves, I'm just going to make this one shift. I'm going to shift from chips to celery. And I'm going to slather the celery with wonderful cheese or something. Pate, I don't know. Not chocolate, okay? Not ice cream. A little healthier. If we can do the small first step, here's what's going to happen. We're going to feel all right. And we're going to be willing to do it again. We're going to be willing to take the next small step to shift our subconscious just a little. Not a lot, just a little. Because the process is step by step. And the steps are small. Steps are small. A new habit is small. By the time we've taken the steps we need, and we look back, we're all the way over there when we started all the way over here. Well. And we didn't scare the subconscious into regressing. So one of the illustrations that I want to use to prove to you how often we do this and how deeply imprinting affects us. My father used to say, when I was being difficult, blonde, Viking in training, and I didn't want to do something, and I would stall and find reasons not to. I would busy myself with something else. I'd try to distract him. My father would eventually get tired of it. And after he had laughed, and then he'd said, okay, you're milking the act. Okay, that's enough. He would look at me and he would say, everyone makes an effort. That's how this works. You don't get to skate forever. Everyone makes an effort. And every time he would do that, every time he would lean in and he would get that look in his eye, I would think, oh my God. Because I knew it. I just didn't want to do it. That's why I was stalling. That's why I would do my dance routines and make people laugh. That's why I would be ridiculously falling over furniture. So I didn't have to make the effort I didn't feel like making. And when my dad would say that to me, yes, Dad, I knew he was right, and I knew I would have to do it, and so I would suck it up, and I would do it. And you know what? The doing never took as long as I built up in my head. I just didn't want to do it. So that was a thing I was raised with. And however difficult I was and however often I was difficult, I heard him do that to me. So we fast forward a million years, and I'm working with a bunch of crazy, brilliant, mad actors who attended a performing arts high school in Ottawa, Canada, called Canterbury High School. Garen knows the school well. And when I was coaching these guys, and they would routinely do all the things that I had done to get out of doing the work, you know, did you rehearse? Did you do it? Did you do the exercise? Are you ready? And then they would all do, you know, they would improv and they would be crazy, silly, and funny. And I would say, come on. We don't have all day. I thought you wanted to do this. Yeah. And they would be stalling. And one day, I suddenly heard myself say, listen, everyone makes an effort. And I was in the middle of it. I had my finger pointing, and I froze, and I thought, oh my God, I'm my father. How the hell did that happen? Right? You've done it. You've said that thing that your parents said that made you roll your eyes so hard you fell over backwards. You've done it. And you think, that's the last thing. Why am I doing this? That's imprinting. The subconscious brain has no idea what those words mean. All it knows is that that memory it has is attached to you doing something that means survival to the subconscious brain. That's why it pulled it up out of its memory bank and said, here, say this. And we did. No conscious thought. Bam. Blah, 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 making me crazy. Bam. Pure emotion. Same as road rage. Same as defend, fight, flight, freeze, hide. That'll teach you. That's the new one. These things come at us out of nowhere. We have no idea how it's possible, and it stops us in our tracks. So I'm telling you now, it's that part of our brain that's below the surface, keeping us alive, making the assumption that that thing we did made everything safe. So it put them together. Isn't that interesting? Every single thing that our subconscious brain does is designed to keep us on track, on the same path, because that's what keeps us alive. The brain that develops here, that develops right after we're born, the thinking brain, the first thinking brain, the cortex, is logical. I call it the actor brain because it doesn't stand around thinking and doing it. It's always doing. It's always on. It's always working. It's always in the moment, resolving situations. The brain at the front prefrontal cortex, that doesn't develop until our mid to late teens. Takes about 10 years, and that's the one that can actually communicate with this brain to fit logic and emotion together. We don't have those tools at our disposal when we're very young. All we have is this emotional brain. So this is where this whole conversation this morning is leading, and I hope it hasn't been too convoluted. The fact that we have a hard time undoing the bad feelings, the fact that we have a hard time walking away from our instant reaction of anger or frustration or suspicion or fear, is because that's how we stayed alive. That brain doesn't know any different. The problem is, and this is what you and I are going to fix, and the day you see it because you do it, you're going to say, oh my, here it is. It's entirely possible, in fact, it's often true, that the things we thought we learned when we were little ducklings ourselves, when we were very, very young, they weren't what was really going on. It's what we assumed. Subconscious brain says, yeah, when the finger is pointing and the noise is this, we shift into survival mode. So say that, do that again, do that again. Has no idea we're saying everyone has to make an effort. It remembers the sound. It remembers the intention. It remembers the impatience. And then it remembers the response that created. That's all it remembers. It places no value judgments on it. Just as we never placed value judgments on the things we heard, the things we thought we heard, the things we saw, the things we thought we saw, the things we did, the things we thought we did. We placed no value judgments on them because that brain hadn't formed yet. Today, now, we are allowed to forgive ourselves for believing things and acting on those beliefs when they weren't true, when they weren't helpful, when they weren't what we thought they were. We're allowed to say, who knew? Instead of you idiot. We're allowed to be okay with the new information. We're allowed. Because now we have the brain that knows what to do with all this new information. We are allowed to teach our subconscious brain that we can also act out of positive excitement. We can also act out of joy and wonder and mischief. We don't always have to act out of fear and rage and frustration. When we get sick, for instance, we don't have to say, oh, I'm sick again and we don't have to do that. We are allowed to say, oh boy, I don't feel that great. It's probably a sign that I need to take better care of myself for a bit. I'm going to tell people that I'm going to need a minute. They'll understand. And then focus on feeling better. We're allowed to do that. Just as we are allowed to say, the thing I thought I wanted, I don't want anymore. We're allowed to want something new. We're allowed to invite people to join us on the journey of discovery. When we were a little kid and we were filled with wonder, we're allowed to get that back. There is nowhere where it says, you can't do that. It's not written anywhere. All we have to do is make the decision that we deserve it. All we have to do. Once we make that decision, it is a simple replacement step. New habit, old habit. New habit, new habit, new habit, old habit, old habit, old habit. It's all we have to do. We just have to want to. We just have to believe we're allowed. We just have to stop beating ourselves up about getting stuff wrong when we had no idea. Not a clue. That's okay. It's part of the learning curve. I would love to know if any of this is creating one of these for you. I'd like you to do something for me. If I've struck a chord, if any of it makes sense, if it has reminded you for any reason of things you've done and do, let me know, okay? Tell me you had an aha. I think that would be amazing. I'd love to hear that from you. Oh, the chief has just arrived. Hello there, Kevin. I like your new tattoo. So, Kevin said something very charming and complimentary this morning when he saw one of my pictures, and I thank you, sir. I thank you. I love causing the utmost damned astonishment. And the reason I love it is because I am constantly giving people more reasons to say yes, more reasons to smile than say no and frown and walk away. And you know why I'm doing that? I'm not doing it because I'm Mother Teresa. I'm doing it because I don't want to stand in a toxic room. I want people to cheer up and have a good time. That's my goal. That's my objective. That's why I'm writing the Pivotry in Motion series. I want people to see how doable it is, how easy it is, how satisfying it is to say, well, for God, that was easy. And then instead of beating yourself up for dragging your heels, get excited at the prospect of doing it again, because it gets better every time. Every time. I'm serious. It's important to remember this. It's not important to dwell on it. It's important to remember this. I, like you, have been through really rotten times. Really rotten. I've had people take exception and wave their fists publicly and push me around. There have been bullying times. There have been all those things, all of it. And I choose not to live there. I choose to say, thank you, but no, and step aside and let all that stuff run on through. I choose. And the reason I choose is the first time I said, I wonder if I can fix it. Okay, just before I go, I need to tell you a story about fixing it, about taking ownership. At one point in my life, when I had made the completely wrong decision that this fellow was a white knight who was going to rescue me, this man said, "No man should treat you like that," and then proceeded so much worse, really. His heart may have been in the right place, but his execution was... Who chose him? Oh, me. So who gets to own it? Me. Is it his fault? No, no. He was always him. I just said, oh, he's going to be a white knight. No, no. So here's what he did. One day, I had a car that kept not working. And so he said, well, I'm going to fix this. I said, you're going to fix the car? No. No. No, he went out and bought me a car. He went out and bought me, it's an interesting model, it's called a POS. Have you ever owned a POS? The first thing that was wrong with it is that it was blue. The second thing was wrong with it was that anytime I was out of sight of any buildings or civilization that I could possibly walk to, the car would die. I'm not kidding, I'm not making this up. The third thing that was wrong with it was that nobody would fix it because it was just too far gone. And one day, I had a sequence of events. It's like, you know, when an airplane falls out of the sky, it wasn't one thing. It was a cascade of chaos. That's what happened. Bing, bing, bing. That's what happened. A domino effect. So he'd done something unspeakable. Something in the place I was living that he had brought me to broke. Screen door latched on the outside because he hadn't taken the hook off, and I couldn't get out until I went and got a knife and cut the screen out of the door. I'm not making this up. It was just that, right? And then I got in the car and I drove somewhere and it died. And I lost it. So I marched to the nearest house. I didn't have a cell phone. Why would I accept a POS vehicle from someone if I could afford a cell phone? So I marched to the nearest house and I said, can you call this number? And they did. And he came and he got me. And he said, okay, let's go home. And I said, no, first of all, we're going to go to the hardware store. Why? You're not going to try and fix the car, are you? And I said, no. Just drive me to the hardware store. I walked into the hardware store. I bought a can. Kevin, you'll appreciate this. This is for you, Kevin. I bought a very large can of trim-clad, anti-rust, flat black paint. Big can. And then I also bought a roller, a small foam roller. And I marched out of the store. I got in the car and he said, what the hell is that for? And I said, I'm going to paint the car. He said, you can't paint the car. And I said, yeah? Want to see me paint the car? Pull up a lawn chair in the driveway. And he said, wait, what color did you buy? There's nothing wrong with the color. And I said, well, first of all, yes, it's blue. What I bought is flat black, trim-clad. He said, you can't get that off. And I said, that's right. You can't get it off. Nobody's going to get it off. And he said, why are you going to paint the car flat black? And I said, because if it's going to act like a little black cloud on my life, it's going to look like a little black cloud on my life. I came home. He said, you can't do it. I said, okay, step aside, son. Step aside. Took me ages. Little roller. I had not at that point in my life reached this stage where I can get rid of the negativity in my subconscious. No, I was full into it. I was painting the entire underside of that iceberg flat black. I painted the whole thing. One point, this man's mother came out of the house and said, what are you doing? I said, is that a trick question? By that time, I had like 3/4 of the car done. She said, well, it looks like you're painting the car. Bingo! All about taking ownership. And the reason is this. It's mine. It's my life. You don't get to tell me about my life. It's mine. And if I am going to sit here and, well, I guess I should really just let things happen because that's the way it is. I don't think so. I have no idea how long I'm here. So while I'm here, it's mine. While I'm here, I'm walking here. And I have to tell you, every single time I drove that little black cloud, I felt amazing. It might be a little black cloud, but it was my little black cloud now. And I honestly can't tell you, I don't think it's even possible to guess why that car didn't seem to break down as often after that. I don't know whether it's I just didn't go out into the country anymore. I don't know whether I was able to reach somehow into its wiring and it said, ooh, she means business. I wonder what else she'll do to me. I have no idea. And it could just be my imagination because I was owning that car. I had stopped feeling sorry for myself. I had stopped being afraid. I had said, not today, not today. Maybe tomorrow, but not today. And this is what I am hoping my videos are. Bye-bye. I am hoping our videos together, these twice-a-week videos, are doing. I am hoping they are showing you, inviting you, instructing you, leading by example, that it is possible to gradually erase the negative habits, gradually erase the feeling of victimhood, gradually erase the frustration, and replace that stuff with, this is mine and I'm proud of it. It's not the best car I'm ever going to own, but it's the one I own now. And I own now. I am walking here. I may not have the perfect shoes. Seldom happens, but I may not have the perfect shoes, but I will. I may not have Story Me TV production company up and running yet, but I will. I may not have the studio yet, but I will. I haven't completed the Pivotry collection yet, but I'm working on it, and I will. So that's the takeaway today. What has imprinted itself on you? What memories do you have of things that just kind of surprised you? Which of those imprints are you accidentally allowing to control you? Which ones are you ready to change? Think about that. We all feel it. We all know these things. We all experience it. All of them. You are no different than me. We are growing and changing and getting better. We are walking here. Why? Because we can. Because we deserve it. Because we're worth it. Said the Viking. So, will I see you on Thursday at 10? I hope so. I have more cool stuff for you. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this. Thank you for just making it magical. the way you always do. Please tell your friends that we're on this crazy journey together and there are still available seats on the boat. Share it with your friends. And then, be good to you. Be good to you. Own the stuff. Own the stuff. You're allowed. Remember to hug your loved ones. See you next time.